So, hello, Robert.
Hello, Lucas. Nice to meet you.
I'm very appreciated that you agreed to do this interview.
Absolutely.
It's honor to me. And I have just a couple of questions. You taught a lot of in your presentation, so it's just like could be like some additional stuff to your talk. So. You in your career life, you did a lot of discipline like storyboard artist, you writing the screenplays, working on story and stuff like that. But you studied the animation, that's right?
Yes, I studied animation at CalArts, the famous character animation program that all the great Disney animators and Pixar people went to. And back when I went, it was a 2D animation program. Mm-hmm. But we also had classes in story and layout and other things. And I thought when I went to CalArts that I would be a 2D Disney animator. That's the job that we were all training for. And I animated my film, my 4-minute film Simon in 2D. Mm-hmm. But during my time there, I discovered that I had a liking for story. And one of my mentors to this day, Michael Giamo, was our design teacher, and he said, "Hey Robert, you seem to have a nice story sense. Have you ever thought about being a story person?" And I said, "What is that?" "Oh, Michael, what does a story person do?" And he told me what Disney story people do and everything, and that was my introduction for it. And sure enough, by the time I graduated, I thought that's the job for me. That's what I want to do, because I knew that after I had storyboarded my whole student film, I was like, boy, I wish I could get somebody else to animate it. You know, I liked working on the story so much, and the animation I enjoyed, but I knew that I liked the story and the writing better, and that was better suited for me.
So my question was, if you miss the artwork doing the animation,
do I miss doing the artwork? Yeah. I still do drawing. I mean, even though I went into story, I still storyboarded for years. Yeah. I've sort of transitioned more into screenwriting and more story consulting, but I still do some gag and concept work, so I still do draw by hand, so that gets my drawing enjoyment out by doing the gag and concept stuff.
And do you think that the fact that you studied the animation and so you have a knowledge about how animation works and everything like that, it's helped to you in storyboard?
Yes, absolutely.
And how?
We learned great, the classic Disney method, and our teachers were great people. My animation teacher was Chris Buck, great master animator, also the director of Frozen, the best animator in the world, where our teachers, my story teacher was Rob Minkoff, our layout teacher, Dan Hansen. We had the best people from Disney come to the studio at night and teach. So I feel like I got a well-rounded education in animation and in all aspects of it. And we were trained by great Disney people. Glenn Keane was one of the professors when I went to school at CalArts, and he would give us classes, and he mentored me, and I learned from him too. So we had the best people at CalArts.
Because I can imagine that the screenwriting for animation movie could be a little bit different from making screenplays for feature movies. And if you know how animation process works, yes, maybe it can help also in the story process, or yes, it doesn't matter.
Right. There's a difference between live action storyboarding and animated storyboarding. I've seen some people do crossover. When I worked on Shrek, I worked with a guy, Dave Lowery, who was a wonderful live action storyboard artist. He was Steven Spielberg's main storyboard artist for years, so he taught us a lot of stuff too. It is a little bit of a different sensibility. What I gather in animation, the storyboard artist has a lot of say in the story. You're in story meetings helping to create the characters in the story. In live action, the feeling I get a little bit, it's more, you don't maybe have as much leeway. You are visualizing the script, working with the director, but you're not necessarily going to have the story input that someone does in animation. Where the story department at Disney and Pixar, they're almost like another team of screenwriters on the film, and they're expected to create story content. It's part of the job.
For me, it's hard when I just like reading the titles on the end of the film. There is a lot of people in category of like screenplay. There is somebody's screenwriter, okay, but there is a lot of story people working with the story.
Absolutely.
And another question is that because for a lot of people and also for me, when I imagine the screenwriter or just writer, I always imagine, you know, like some lonely guy writing on typewriter alone and smoking a lot of cigarettes, like Belmondo in this, you know, Rio de Janeiro, Man from the Rio, the movies and stuff like that. But yeah, that's not a reality of how in reality animated movie.
Yeah, in the better stuff I've worked on, the writers are always there present with the story department, with the director. It's a big room. The directors, the screenwriters, the story department, creative producers, all working together. I talked a lot about team collaboration, and I think it works much better that way. Unless there's stuff that I've worked on has been when the writers were working away, maybe 1,000 kilometers away, and just mailing the things in. There's just the magic that happens when you're in the same room at the same time. And all those great films were made that way. Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Shrek were all made with a big room of everyone working together and collaborating together. And the story people are expected to come up with ideas. That's part of your job,
But who is the author?
Well, it's a team effort on those films. Definitely. You have, film is ultimately a director's medium. So on those films, on Lion King and Beauty and the Beast, it's a director's medium, it's a director's film, but a lot of people contribute to that creation of that final product. Yeah. No doubt about it that it's a team effort and a collaborative effort.
Mm-hmm. So, my question about if you prefer the collaborating work or working alone on the script, it's definitely collaboration because more people, more
definitely. Even if I'm so much so that even if I'm working on my own thing, I always want to. You get too close to it, so you want to get feedback, and that feedback is so important. So I have a team of a half a dozen people who are other writers or directors who I trust that I let read my thing and give me notes and feedback. Yeah. You got to have checks and balances, because you miss stuff, and invariably you write something and you think, oh, that's the most brilliant thing in the world, and then someone else will read it and go, I don't get that at all. And conversely, something you write is just a throwaway, and just you wrote it and you think nobody's going to like that, and your friend says, no, that's the brilliant idea. That's what you want to get in there. So artists are notoriously, artists and writers are not always the best judges of our own work. It's not our job. Like, our job is to create. So it's nice to have a team of checks and balances, other people who can look over your work and give you honest feedback.
But I think that you have to, on the beginning, you have to learn a little bit. Like, for me, it's always hard to present to other people like bad ideas. I have, when I'm developing something, I have a lot of ideas, and just myself, I know that this is a good idea, this is bad. But when you're doing something like collaborating with the other people, it's important also show them also the bad idea, because they have to need it, they have to see it, and they have to decide together if it's really bad or not, and this is some sort of skill, but I believe that you have to a little bit learn, because, for example, the Czech schools education, because I was on Czech art school and high school and university, and it's always about individual. We all learn, everybody, we all learn individual artists, and the collaboration, it's not in our DNA, if I can say like that. So yeah, that's, and I think David and Anna-Malie trying to change here in Czech Republic this concept. So
yeah, I could say to people, like, if you like those films, so Pixar and Disney, that's how they're made, and they would have an expression at Pixar, in this Pixar story room, they would say, don't edit yourself. That's not your job. At Disney or a Pixar story room, your job is just to come up with good ideas. Just come up with ideas. You can even say what's a good idea and a bad idea. Let the director, let the producer, the rest of the story department say what is a good idea and a bad idea. Sometimes ideas you think are terrible, like I said, ideas you think are terrible wind up being great and go into film, and conversely, sometimes you come up with something at 2 in the morning, you think, wait till I show this is brilliance, and people go, oh, I've seen that a million times before, it's not there.
Yeah, that's true. And when you work on, because you have experience with, for me, a lot of movies where you're working on it, it's like icon and famous, like ToyStory, Shrek, and etc. Beauty and Beast. But for example, when you're working on the Shrek, for example, or ToyStory, did you know at that time that this will be something? Because ToyStory, I think it's a little bit like something in the animated movie or 3D animated movie, it's like really big things.
Yeah.
Shrek was, for me, it's maybe for DreamWorks or, it's also like, how say it, like, about Shrek is animated movie, but everybody knows them. Also my mother, and she doesn't care about, animated more, but like, so when you're working on movies like that, in that time, you know it, that will be great or not?
It's a great question. I would say mixed, yes and no, and I'll give you examples of each.
Yeah.
Toy Story was like a golden project. I remember seeing it when I was working in Disney development. They had like a board of upcoming projects, and this would have been back in 1990 or 1991, so 4 or 5 years away from release. Toy Story comes out in 95. And I remember looking at that and going, wow, that's a great project. I know the Pixar shorts, I know John Lasseter's shorts, that is going to be a winner. I could just earmark that. And when I got a chance to work on it, I jumped at it because I was like, that's going to be a great project. And it was like it was just like the heavens came together, the magic happened, just like everything came together on that project. And from day one, it was like a golden child
but sometimes,
project.
But sometimes happen that on the paper looks great, but then it's not. But
yes, and I never worked on a film that people said, "Oh, this is going to be a bad film." But every film you work on, everybody thinks it's going to be a great film. So 2 films I worked on that were more. Toy Story, I think, is the only one I worked at that you thought this is going to be great from day one, and it turned out that way. And it was just like watching a wave hit the beach. It was just like, this is going to be great. People are going to love it. We would go to the screenings where they test market it, and it played great. We were like, this is going to be big. This is going to be major. And it hit the wave hit, and it changed everything. I've also worked on other stuff in which, and 2 great examples of this, Lucas, would be Lion King and Shrek. Both Lion King and Shrek, very troubled projects. In the beginning, nobody wanted to work on Lion King. Animators, all Disney's top gun animators begged off of Lion King. Everybody thought it was the dog project, and they thought Pocahontas was going to be the golden child, and nobody wanted to work on Lion King. I worked with people who moved away from the studio, who left the studio just to get away from it. If you would have said back then it will, become what it was, never would have believed it. Very troubled project, but with time and effort and reworking, and it just found its magic formula. It took, a good 4 years in development to get to where it was. So another one like that would be Shrek too. Shrek was a very troubled project from early on. Oh, it was again.
So
it was
different
the dog
from
project.
Toy Story, because Toy Story sounds like a great project, DreamWorks.
Toy Story, and of all the things I've worked on like 15 features. It's the only one that's going to be great, and it was.
And
Shrek was another troubled project. Nobody wanted to work on Shrek. It was the dog project of the studio, and if you would have told us back then, someday this project will be beloved around the world and will be like their flagship for DreamWorks franchise. It's like their Mickey Mouse. Shrek is like their Mickey Mouse. We would have just laughed. We would have said, no, how? But again, with enough time, we worked, and it all came together at the end. Sometimes things just sort of take a long time to gestate and come together, and just in that last 6 months or a year, everything comes together.
So we have to a little bit, and I think we have to ending. So we have to going so fast to end. I have just one question about, because you are also a teacher.
Yes.
There is something what you can say that it's today's students are different than student in your time. Like specifically in art department or animation and stuff. Is there something what you can mention? Like what you can see some difference between?
I'm not sure if I see that difference. I teach at CalArts, and I'm not sure if it's changed that much, to be honest. So as I walk the hallways of CalArts, it's like people look the same as we did back then. The technology, that's the big difference. The advent of computers is a game changer. We all drew pencil on paper. But that's, the content is the king, the content is the thing. So is today's CalArts student that much different than when I went? The only thing I would say is that everything has been ratcheted up, and animation exploded and became so popular that it's much more difficult to get into CalArts than when I went. Now it's like getting into Stanford. It's the 7% acceptance rate. We get applications from all over the world. So the quality of the drawing, the quality has all been ratcheted up.
Yeah.
But as I walk the hallways, I see students who remind me of me and my friends back then, and they talk about the same things, and they talk about and they study the same films. So it hasn't changed all that much.
Okay. And what do you think? If you wanna be like, because there's a lot of young people who watching to us, just 45. It's not a lot of.
Yes, hello, all of you.
I'm appreciative for that. And if somebody want to write screenplay for feature movie or animated movie, does whatever. But what do you think that is like important thing what you have to, like, human being, what you have to have it, like, or feature, like, if I am like artist doing drawing, I have to have some sort of talent. What about writing?
Writing, that's a good question. I think for writing, the thing that helps you best is just life experience. Writers are people who've experienced stuff, travel, talk to people, get out there, go to bars, restaurants, travel on your own, talk to people, talk to someone in a foreign country in a pub somewhere, hear their stories. The best thing that writers need are stories.
Listening.
Right, always listening. I think that's the most important quality for writers, to be a good listener.
And it's not easy sometimes. No. Yeah. Okay. So, I have a more question, but we have to end there.
If they have any other questions, tell them to go
there is
through
one. Ropolo ask you, do you know the storybook from Robert McKee? Does it worth to read it? I don't know.
Yes, I'm a big fan of Robert McKee. I've been to his seminar 9 times. Every studio I've worked at, we went. The Pixar guys are huge into Robert McKee. If there was one book or course that I would recommend, it's Robert McKee. The book is very dense. If there's any way you can see him speak in person, he does come to Europe. That would be the number one. My biggest recommendations would be number 1, Robert McKee story, and comedy improv classes. Something about comedy improv is very similar to what we do in a story department at Disney and Pixar, of having to think quickly on your feet. So Robert McKee and
good
comedy improv classes.
From you for our audience.
Okay. And if they have any other questions too, if they want to email you or be in touch with you, and I'll give you my information, and you can pass it on to me someday. Okay. So don't feel like they missed it if they missed me in this short window of time.
So, again, Robert, thank you for this interview.
You're very welcome.
It was lovely, nice, and thankful. It was delicious.
You're very welcome. So, thank you very much. And nice to meet you all too. Hope we get to talk more someday.
Yeah. I have to say something in Czech to be done, but thank you again.
You're very welcome.
Tak lidi, slyšeli jste to? Já to teď tady ukončím, tady už se to stěhuje, všechno to končí, tak já to povypínám, mějte se pěkně a zase se někdy uvidíme tady, jo? Tak zatím, čau.